Did you know we could easily reverse global warming in just a few months? Well, we can, but the problem is that you might not like how. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to explain the controversial concept of reversing global warming by actually polluting the Earth even more. It might sound crazy, but some scientists are considering it due to its potential to quickly reduce global temperatures. Since this is a controversial topic, I want to warn you that I'm going to present a positive perspective on this method. The globe is getting hotter, and we see new heat records every year. Scientists are concerned. Some papers suggest Northern Europe will cool down, and the eastern US will warm up really fast in the next few decades, because sea current might grind to a halt. This transition could happen in a matter of months, and be impossible to turn around in our lifetimes. This might happen because the Earth's rotation creates the Gulf Stream, which brings warm water from the Caribbean to Northern Europe. This warm water is salty, so when it cools down near the poles, it becomes heavier and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. As it sinks, it moves south and pulls more warm water north, keeping the UK and Scandinavia warmer. This process also cools down Eastern America. However, melting ice from Greenland is adding fresh water to the ocean, making the water less salty. This means the warm water from the Gulf Stream isn't heavy enough to sink anymore. As a result, the circulation slows down, so Northern Europe doesn't get as warm, and Eastern America doesn't cool down as much. So what are we doing about it? Are we slowing down our CO2 emissions? Unfortunately, are we increasing them? Due to another fact that we have had the biggest decrease in poverty the world has ever seen during this century. Ironically, does better living also increases CO2 emissions? We won't convince the masses of poor people around the world to stay poor. So the emissions will continue to grow. Dramatic changes in weather patterns could force people to migrate in search of safer conditions, potentially leading to international conflicts. Additionally, agricultural failures might occur as plants struggle to adapt to rapid weather changes, resulting in less food, more migration, and an escalating cycle of violence. So, do we really want to risk finding out what happens if we continue to heat the Earth? To solve climate change, we need to invest in renewables, nuclear energy, batteries, and olivine weathering. However, it will take at least a few decades to achieve significant results. In the meantime, CO2 emissions will continue to rise, and we won't be able to reverse them quickly enough, leading to increasing global temperatures. There is only one immediate solution to avoid these potentially catastrophic consequences: cooling the Earth artificially until we can control CO2 levels. The most effective method we know is to send SO2 into the stratosphere. We know this because when a major volcanic eruption occurs, it releases large amounts of gases, ash, and aerosol droplets into the atmosphere. One of the key gases is sulfur dioxide, or SO2. Once in the stratosphere, sulfur dioxide reacts with water vapor to form sulfuric acid, which then condenses into fine sulfate aerosols. These sulfate aerosols increase the reflection of sunlight back into space, reducing the amount of solar radiation that reaches the Earth's surface. The increased reflection of sunlight leads to a cooling effect on the Earth's lower atmosphere. For example, the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991 caused global temperatures to drop by about 0.5 degrees Celsius for a few years. That's why scientists are exploring if stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, could be the key to cooling our planet. Stratospheric aerosol injection is a proposed method of solar geoengineering aimed at reducing global warming. It involves flying balloons up to the stratosphere to inject tiny particles of SO2 into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away from Earth, creating a cooling effect. And we don't need much to offset the CO2. As a rule of thumb, 1 gram of SO2 can offset 1 ton of CO2 for a year. This means the relationship between SO2 and CO2 is 1 to 1 million. Imagine a sky filled with enormous balloons, gracefully ascending towards the heavens. These balloons, slender and towering, are filled with hydrogen and sulfur dioxide, SO2, at their base. As they float higher and higher, they eventually reach the stratosphere, where they ignite and release the SO2 into the atmosphere. The beauty of this method lies in its simplicity and cost-effectiveness. All it takes is the SO2 and hydrogen to lift the balloon and burn it in the stratosphere. It's an incredibly cheap solution, making it an attractive option for large-scale implementation. The ideal location for releasing SO2 is near the equator. Here, the intense heat causes the air to rise up to the stratosphere, allowing the SO2 to disperse and travel around the globe. Scientists have meticulously modeled the injection points and concluded that a few strategic locations slightly north and south of the equator would be perfect. From these points, the SO2 would eventually settle near the poles. The magic altitude appears to be around 20 kilometers. At this height, the particles remain in the stratosphere for an optimal duration. While going higher might extend their stay slightly, the benefits diminish beyond this point. The moment the particles are released, they begin their work, reflecting sunlight and cooling the Earth. Within 6 months, we would start to notice a reversal in temperature trends, showcasing the immediate impact of this innovative approach. There's a lot of reason for why we should be comfortable about this. Number 1, we only need to inject 2% of the SO2 we're already releasing into the atmosphere. Number 2, it would be much higher up, which is safer than what we currently do. Now, number 3, nature has been testing this for us for billions of years through its volcanoes. Despite that, we have considered every downside. We know a lot about the impacts of SO2 on different systems of the Earth. There are many papers on this topic. I couldn't find any seriously bad effects. Surprisingly, I did find many positive effects. Overall, I'm not sure that SO2 injection, done well, would be bad for the Earth, even without the climate change benefits. We used to emit lots of H2SO4, sulfuric acid, and we reduced emissions because they caused acid rain. Acid mixed with water, fell on land, and destroyed plants. The problem with acid rain was not its existence, but its concentration. A little bit of acid isn't problematic, a ton of it is. So the right question should be, at what levels is acid rain a problem, and would SO2 injection reach this concentration? As you can imagine, it wouldn't, since we would only be inserting an additional 2% of SO2 into the atmosphere, spread across the entire world and in the stratosphere, instead of the closer troposphere. Scientists concluded that the impact on ecosystems would be negligible. Thankfully, SO2 pollutes 25 times less in the stratosphere. Each unit of injected sulfur incurs 1/25 the particulate matter exposure of a unit of sulfur emitted from surface sources. If we only inject an additional 2% of SO2 into the atmosphere, the impact is basically a pollution increase of particulates of 0.08%. Very little, and easily offset by our improvements brought about by electric vehicles, solar energy, and the like. And remember, that's because of the bad effect of lowering temperatures. Aside from particulates, SO2 would decrease ozone in the near atmosphere, and since ozone is a pollutant, that would be good. However, a decrease in ozone would increase UV radiation, bad for skin cancers. If you're worried about ozone depletion, you should know that the person who first proposed SO2 injection was Paul Crutzen, a Nobel Prize winner for figuring out the chemistry of ozone depletion, which led to the closure of the ozone hole. He says in his paper, compensating for a CO2 doubling would lead to larger ozone loss, but not as large as after Mount Pinatubo. Furthermore, the amounts of stratospheric chlorine radicals, coming from past production of chlorofluorocarbon gases, are now declining by international regulation, so that ozone will significantly recover by the middle of this century. The Pinatubo eruption temporarily cooled the planet by about 0.5 degrees Celsius, but the ozone layer did not collapse. More recently, an expert in ozone depletion said that cooling the Earth by 0.5 degrees Celsius with SO2 would have some effect on ozone, but it will not destroy the ozone layer and create catastrophic consequences. Existing studies do not suggest a deepening of the ozone hole beyond that already experienced. The balance of these three effects, ozone, nitrate particulates, and UV light, is a slight increase in deaths every year of tilde 40k people, equivalent to 1% more deaths from respiratory diseases, because SO2 would be lowering temperatures. However, this doesn't include the broader effects of eliminating global warming, millions of deaths, famines, wars, mass migrations, It just takes into account the direct impact of SO2 on nitrate aerosols. If you took out that downside, SO2 injection would reduce deaths from pollution, not increase them. As I see it, the disagreement is not on SO2 facts, but on human behavior. The main argument against SO2 injection is, if SO2 injection works well, it might reduce our urgency to fight CO2 emissions, which would be bad. Aside from the narrow-mindedness of the argument, once you take a step back, even picking on the argument directly is easy. There's no turning back for renewables. Solar, wind, and batteries will take over most of the world's electricity generation, and electricity will be replacing other energy vehicles throughout the economy. All of this simply because they're cheaper than fossil fuels now. Decarbonization is now probably unstoppable. So a scenario where we get complacent releasing ever more amounts of CO2 is unlikely. Even if this was not the case, plenty of people still want to decrease the CO2 we release. They would still be working on it. If they didn't, that would be because they concluded there's no need. Let them work on that while others work on SO2. What if we do halt global warming, and we don't decarbonize, and there are unintended consequences? In that case, we should look at them when they arrive and deal with them. Did we deal with climate change in the 19th century? No, it's a problem to tackle in the 20th and 21st century. As a rule of thumb, I have a philosophy. Let's not solve problems we don't have, and instead solve problems we do have. For decades, environmentalists said, we shouldn't talk about sequestering carbon. This will be an excuse to keep burning fossil fuels. And they succeeded. For decades, it was a taboo. Did that make us curb our fossil fuel use? No, because most people say they care about the environment, but they're not willing to dramatically change their lifestyles for it. The result is that now it's 2025. We've come to our senses. We've realized we can't solve climate change without sequestering CO2, and we need to catch up on decades of delay on sequestration technology because we started late. Now, the same kinds of people want to delay SO2 injection using the same argument. If we let them, the only thing that would achieve is to make the Earth burn a bit harder and delay the inescapable necessity of SO2 injection. Should we do this? Yes. The benefits far outweigh the cons. The conversation has been stuck in the academic world, where excessive caution has led some academics to call for more study. It's time to move beyond theory and study it at scale in the real world. But when we have tried to test this, environmentalists have managed to stop the efforts. They refuse to accept that we live in a capitalist world, where people prioritize comfort over the environment and are unwilling to change their behaviors to stop climate change. Politicians and journalists picked up on this, virtue signaling their luxury beliefs and making the deluded options seem righteous. Unfortunately, we can't stop emissions and capture carbon in time, but we can delay their effects until we find a solution. Who will lead the way? It took a couple of renegades to say, haters gonna hate. They recognized the obvious solution and decided to act. If nobody else is going to do it, they will. We should support these renegades who are doing the right thing against the righteous and confused obstructionists. The more of us who join, the more we will delay global warming and signal to the world. This time, we're going to do the right thing.